come at the end of the year, it can come in 50% payments, but at least at the end of the year it has to be 134. And that's up from the current 100, and it's also up from the 122, because they used more recent data to come up with that 134. All right. Minimum salary levels, the fact that you now have to pay 913, has been with the white-collar exemptions since the very, very first regs, which came out in October of 1938. In October of 1938, it was $25. That was the salary. But salary levels have been part of the FLSA since 1938. There is no salary level needed at all for outside sales, for teachers, for doctors, and for lawyers. This is the key slide for you. If you meet the definition of a bona fide teacher, which I'm going to go over in a minute, there's no salary level. Doesn't matter. None. So your key here at the end of my presentation today is to find as many people as possible in your work that can meet that definition of teacher, because there's no salary level requirement required. And only computer professionals can be paid hourly. How'd they get those numbers? How'd they get that 913? Well, interestingly enough, they made a list of all the salaried persons in the United States, from lowest to highest, and then they did it by region. And then they made a slice at 40%. What salaries at 40%? And they chose the region which had the lowest number, which was the South. So 913 is the lowest slice at 40% of the list of all the salary levels in the United States. That's how it came about. For the highly compensated, they took the national list. They didn't break it up by regions. They made a slice at 90%. So that at the 90th percentile nationally, people are making about $134,000. You know, what is that saying about our highly paid athletes playing professional ball, that the 90th percentile of salaried workers in the United States is 134? Okay, this is the comment.
They're all the 1%.
Okay. Non-discretionary. Actually, you might sit up here because it's kind of like squats. We're going to talk about my lavish.
I'm used to it. Elaine works more often.
Elaine, you know, Elaine, ouch. I hear your comment about Google Docs. I want to confirm that's a great tool. I'm on a board and I get all my documents in Google Docs. It's a great tool, so don't be afraid of it. Okay, so bonuses and commissions. So I don't know if you pay any of your workers by bonuses and commissions. Does anybody do that? No, you can kind of do it. But that's essentially what they're now permitting you to do is to say, okay, 10% off 913 is $821. So you can pay an employee $821 each week, and then at the end of the quarter, give them whatever commissions or bonuses you want, and then you have to double check that they got the 913 times 13 weeks in the quarter. So if they didn't get it in that quarter, you're allowed to make up pay the next pay period after the end of the quarter. So again, you pay them 90% salary, 13 weeks, pay all the bonuses you want, and make sure it's equivalent to 913 times 13. And finally, there's going to be automatic increases. The first one will be in 2020. So in 2020, January 1, 2020, they're going to start looking at that in 2019, and they're going to look at where that 40% number is, and then they're going to give you some advice, and it's going to come down the road. All right, when is all this going to happen? December 1, 2016. So you're lucky, you got us early. We're going to tell you what to do to comply, but you still have about 6 months. A little less, 2 weeks less. So think about it. It's not going away, okay? Even if we get a new president, and even if which we will have a new president, and if that president is on the Republican side of the ledger, he would have to start again with the process. And these are going into effect December 1. So there's going to be some time in in which these are going to be in effect. There's no legal way that he could not have these go into effect. There will be lawsuits. There will be congressional acts. People will try. But in my opinion, that language in the statute gives the Secretary enormous power to define and delimit the terms as they see fit. Okay. Let me just talk now about bona fide teachers, because they're the key to this presentation today. Teachers are not subject to the salary basis test, either as to form, that is, that doesn't have to be paid on a salary basis, or as to amount. University professors who qualify as teachers may be paid any amount on any basis, and such compensation is not subject to deductions because the employee worked less than a full day, which is not true if you're not a teacher. All right, what's a teacher? Perhaps you've been struggling your whole life to think of that. Nevertheless, the DOL has done it for you for purposes of this exemption. A teacher is exempt when his or her primary duty is teaching, tutoring, instructing, or lecturing in the activity of imparting knowledge. Teaching, tutoring, instructing, or lecturing. And they are employed in this activity in an educational establishment. As you can imagine, lawyers, right? There's been litigation on both parts of that definition. There's been litigation on what's an educational establishment. So one of the first litigations was, you know those driver training schools where you get inside the big semi and you learn how to drive a semi? Were those driver training schools an educational establishment? And under the teaching, tutoring, lecturing, all kinds of persons have come under question. For your purposes, the question is, what about coaches and assistant coaches and persons in your field? All right. Coaches. This is what the DOL has said. Athletic coaches and assistant coaches may fall under the teacher exemption if their primary duty is teaching, which may include instructing athletes in how to perform their sport. If their primary duty includes recruiting athletes or doing manual labor, they're not considered teachers. Now let's look at that language. It says if their primary duty includes recruiting or manual labor. So what's really important here is for you to decide what's the primary duty of your athletic coaches and trainers. The DOL says, right in its reg, if a coach could primarily be responsible for instructing athletes in how to perform their sport, but they also spend time recruiting or doing manual labor, they would still be considered teaching.
We had a really good question at lunch about this.
Okay.
From Matt from Newberry. He was asking, when you have coaches who are restricted from recruiting, depending on their sport, for certain time periods, so when they have to recruit, that's all they're doing for those weeks, how do you assess what their primary duty actually is?
That's a great question, Matt. No, whoever guy it is. Because, generally speaking, the Field Labor Standards Act is a work week to work week statute. You look at each work week and you decide whether the person meets the criteria. But in some jobs, you are permitted to look at the job as a whole. That is to say, some weeks the kids are on the field and you're coaching and you're imparting knowledge. Sometimes you're recruiting. Sometimes you're doing manual labor. So that's why the Department of Labor uses the primary duty test. And it does not require that 50% of the time is spent imparting knowledge. It's not required. But if, for example, you did spend 50% of the time, you're probably going to be exempt. So time alone is not a factor, but if you've got time on your side, as a popular song would say, then you're probably going to be exempt. But my guess is that it's hard to decide in a 52-week year how the time all plays out. But if the time is primarily spent on teaching coaching. And if the recruitment is related to the teaching coaching, then you would argue this, because you want a certain kind of player. You want a player that meets this criteria or that criteria. It's part of your teaching style. Then you could argue again, it's all part of the primary duty. This recruiting is all part of the primary duty. Question?
The question is, all of us have, I assume all of us do, expect our coaches to also meet their bench numbers, because we're all going good. If you have a goal for a coach to have X number of athletes, would that be considered, would that mess up this?
Well, it wouldn't mess it up. I mean, the whole point of meeting the primary duties test is to show a lot of factors that leads to the primary duty of that coach instructing those employees, not employees, students, right there. We're going to get to a slide on whether or not students are workers in a minute. But, so I hear you. I don't think the fact that you've got a number they have to meet and that you want them to fill their bench is helpful. It doesn't go to the teaching part of it. It doesn't, okay? So you would have to be creative to say, but I can't have a football team on the field if I haven't got at least 22 players, and hopefully 42 players, or 45, whatever it is. So that you say, in order to do that teaching job well, incredibly, I need 45 players. I got a kicker, I got a punt returner, I got whatever. So hopefully your school won't be the test case on but will someone out there challenge the exemption for coaches?